Let me begin. Barack Obama started out with a number of strikes against him as far as the American Jewish community was concerned. Number one, he is Barack Hussein Obama. And for many Americans and for a number of Jews, this was a problem and in fact continues to be a problem. The fact that he is an African American did not, I think, play a role in the way American Jews looked at him. American Jews had long been sympathetic on the issue of civil rights, and I may have given you this lecture before, I will not give it to you now. Actually, I've spent a good deal of time. I'm writing a book about Jewish involvement in the United States in the civil rights movement. It is something that American Jewry can be very, very proud about. But there were some other things. He attended a church by Reverend Wright, the infamous Reverend Wright. Reverend Wright was a man that blasted the United States, has attacked the state of Israel, and has verged on anti-Semitism. Barack Obama stood in that church for many, many years. I cannot speak for you. I can only speak for myself and for close friends. If my rabbi had taken a position similar to the ones that Reverend Wright had spoken about, one of two things would have happened. Either we would have tried to get the rabbi to leave, or we ourselves would have left the congregation. Barack Obama stood in that congregation. He also has, from the Jewish perspective, some friends that were not particularly, let us say, congenial to the Jewish community. That's Professor Ayers, a former terrorist who has never really repented from the activity that he did in an earlier period of time. And Barack Obama was associated with some, how can one put it delicately, rabbis very, very far to the left, people who had at one time been very critical of the state of Israel. So this was a problem for the American Jewish community. But the support he received flowed from a number of things. That is, he was vouched for by some of the most prominent Jews in the city of Chicago, particularly from one of the wealthiest families in the United States, the Pritzker family. They supported him, and some very prominent Jews in Chicago supported him from his earliest times as a politician. They told us that forget about Ayers, forget about all of that problems in his past. This is a man that is in our corner. This is a man that is safe and solid on the issue of Israel. That, together with the traditional Jewish attachment to the Democratic Party, would lead to the fact that Barack Obama received 78% of the Jewish vote in the 2008 elections. This is, again, let me say to you, the only other large ethnic or religious or racial group in the United States that gave more support to Barack Obama was the African American community, which gave approximately 95% of the vote to him. So in short, Jews remain loyal to the Democratic Party, and they will remain loyal to Barack Obama. Let's cut to the chase. What has Barack Obama done for the state of Israel? And the answer is he has done a good deal. That is, the flow of weaponry from the United States to the state of Israel is greater than it has ever been before in the history of the American-Israeli relationship. I have often said that in terms of American presidents, the second President Bush was probably the one both viscerally and even intellectually sympathetic to the state of Israel. Bush was always the second president, not his father. The second President Bush was always in Israel's corner. And I believe that to be the case. But not even the second President Bush turned over the nature of weapons or the type of weapons that Barack Obama has turned over. Barack Obama has delivered not the most sophisticated, not the latest, but certainly apparently some of the bunker-busting bombs that Israel has wanted. And one has to be impressed by the fact that people who are considered to be friends of Israel, for example, Dennis Ross said last week that no American president has been done more for the state of Israel than has Barack Obama. So we are not talking about a man who has done nothing for the state of Israel. He has done a good deal. He also supported Israel last September at the United Nations, when Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, tried to make an end run around, let's say, face-to-face negotiations between Israel and the PLO. That is, Barack Obama spoke at the United Nations and said, no, the only way that peace will come will be through direct negotiations. So we are talking about a man who has given a good deal of support to the state of Israel. But we are also talking about a man who has made a number of mistakes. Was it naivete on his part? Was it inexperience on his part? Or is there something else behind those mistakes? First mistake, he never went to visit the state of Israel. That was not a good thing. Everyone knows that if peace is to come, Israel is going to have to make some concessions. Israel, we went over this before, Israel, everyone understands, including most Israelis, will have to relinquish the major part of what is euphemistically referred to as the West Bank. Israel will have to take chances. It will have to take risks. You cannot ask the Israelis to make risks unless you go to them, unless you stand in the Knesset and you tell them certain things. Barack Obama visited the Middle East but bypassed Israel. That was not a good thing. The Israelis did not like him on an a priori basis. They worried about him. They worried about those associations. They worried about his middle name. They worried about the fact that some of his formative years were in a Muslim school in Indonesia. They worried about all of those things. His popularity in Israel, really at the time, 2008, really close to 2012, was in the single digits. He should have gone to Israel. That's the first mistake. The second mistake was, or two and three mistakes, was when he went to Cairo and made that speech. Some American Jews foolishly thought that that speech was the best thing since sliced bread. He spoke to the Arabs, he spoke to the Egyptian parliament, and through them he spoke to the Arab and to the Islamic world. And he defended the existence of Israel, the right of the Jews to have a state in Israel, on the basis of the Holocaust. And some American Jews, many American Jews, thought that was a good thing. But you and I know that the Jewish claim to what we call Eretz Yisrael antedates the Holocaust by probably 3,000 years. I have said this before. Again, the Arabs have a legitimate claim, but we too have a legitimate claim. This is the land of David and Solomon. This is the land of the temples. This is the land of the prophets. This is the land of where our people entered history. Moreover, when you base Jewish claims to that land on the Holocaust, you play into the hands of the more sophisticated anti-Israeli elements within the Middle East. Most Arabs who think about these things consider President Ahmadinejad a fool. Not a fool, but even someone who is acting against the best interests of the Islamic world. That is, to say that there was no Holocaust is tantamount to saying that the world is flat. It's just plain stupid. And that's what a number of Arab intellectuals have been saying for quite some time. There is. Most Arabs who think about these things consider President Ahmadinejad a fool. Not a fool, but even someone who is acting against the best interests of the Islamic world. That is, to say that there was no Holocaust is tantamount to saying that the world is flat. It's just plain stupid. And that's what a number of Arab intellectuals have been saying for quite some time. There is no, on their part, they don't deny the Holocaust took place. They don't deny that 6 million Jews were killed, but their argument is, yes, the Holocaust took place, yes, 6 million Jews died, but we Arabs didn't do it. The Europeans did it. So why did you inflict the state of Israel upon us? So when President Obama said that, again, Israel's right to existence is based on the Holocaust, he really was not doing a service, really, to the history of the period. In addition to that, he made a clear and unequivocal statement calling upon Israel to cease from the settlements. No more settlements. Now, please do not misconstrue what I'm about to tell you. I am not in favor of the settlements. I believe that Israel made a mistake, certainly in some of those settlements. And beyond some areas, again, I know that Malay Adumim, it will remain. Efrat will probably remain. There are a whole host of settlements that should remain. But to continue settlements, particularly in those areas where everyone knows those areas will be returned to an independent Palestinian state, does not make a good deal of sense. But it wasn't necessary to say that publicly. And the reason for that is, for 17 years, Israel had negotiated with Yasser Arafat, and Arafat had never made a precondition for negotiations a cessation of Israeli settlements. Mahmoud Abbas, who now leads the PLO, is reputed to have said, Obama put me up a tree, and I couldn't climb down from it. That is, Obama calls for an end to the settlements. How can I say less? Obama made a mistake. Was he ill-advised? Was this inexperience? Well, he has made a number of mistakes. The last mistake, of course, was, again, and certainly not directly related to the Middle East, but related to the Jews, at least peripherally. How can an American president, supposedly the smartest guy in the room, in whichever room he goes, how can he make a reference to Polish death camps? Yes, the 6 extermination camps were located in Poland. You have no idea. For those of you that came with me when we go to Poland, you know how almost, it's not, again, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, how much obsessed the Poles are about their suffering in the Holocaust. Now, the Poles, many Poles did not behave with glory in dealing with the Jews. But to say they're Polish death camps, that's nonsense. These were German extermination camps that were based in Poland. And it should be pointed out, never in the camps, not in the concentration camps, in the extermination camps, were Poles used by the Germans as auxiliaries. The Germans did not trust the Poles. In Auschwitz, all the non-German auxiliaries were Ukrainians and Lithuanians, particularly Ukrainians. They were not Poles. To say that these were Polish death camps has absolutely infuriated the Polish government and millions upon millions of Poles. How could the president make a mistake like that? He's made other mistakes. When a distinguished black or African-American Harvard professor was arrested by a policeman, the president intervened in what was clearly a local case, perhaps a mistake. It was wrong to do that type of thing. So the president, who was supposed to be the smartest person in America, certainly the smartest politician in America, makes mistakes. This, again, in dealing with the Middle East, he has made a number of mistakes. So what should the president do? Now, it's easy for me to say this to you, but here is what I think he should do. And I think there are many Americans, Jews and others, who would agree with me. Number one, he's got to visit Israel. Now it's a little bit too late. Now it will look like pandering to the Jews, to the Jewish vote in the United States. But eventually he's got to go there. And he's got to stand up in the Knesset, and he's got to say to the people of Israel what he said at the AIPAC conference. But he's got to say it in Israel. I'm with you. I've got your back. I'm in your corner. The relationship between Israel and the United States is unbreakable. We will stand with you. And he can also say, he can do it, he can talk about no more settlements in those remote areas. By doing that, he gives Prime Minister Netanyahu a certain amount of cover. Now, Netanyahu doesn't need as much cover as he had in the past because of his relationship now with the Kadima party. That's one of the great questions for the future. Will Netanyahu use this new coalition to be more conciliatory, and while it may not bring peace with the Palestinians, it at the very least will enhance the Israeli image in the United States and in the European Union. So he can do that. And then what he's got to do is get in the limousine and go to Ramallah. And in Ramallah, he's got to say a number of things. And he can say it. He can even bring his teleprompter along with him, and that will help him. But he's got to say it. And what he's got to say in very nuanced language, he is a master of the language, he should be able to say it. Someone has got to tell the Palestinians they are not going home. That's a crucial issue. No Israeli government, even one of the far left, is going to be will be willing to accept a massive return of Palestinians. It will destroy the state of Israel. It is as simple as that. And so he's got to say that. And when he says that, he gives Mahmoud Abbas cover, because Abbas himself is a refugee from Swat. And Abbas can say to the Palestinians, look, I know what it is to be a refugee, again and again, I know all of this. The Americans will not allow it. And Obama, the president has to go on to say, I said essentially what I said to some of you in another lecture this weekend, and that is, get on with your lives. We will give you billions upon billions of dollars in compensation. Put 1948 behind you, build lives for your children and your grandchildren. That is what has to be done. That's the first thing that he has to do. The second thing that he has to do is he's got to address Iran. I will say to you, as Charles Krauthammer put out in a very interesting article, Krauthammer said, how many people remember that Neville Chamberlain, before, that is, engaging with Adolf Hitler, that Neville Chamberlain was not a bad prime minister? That Neville Chamberlain tried to ameliorate the problems of the Depression in England. That is, a certain number of social welfare measures. Nobody knows that. The only thing that people remember about Neville Chamberlain is Munich and the policy of appeasement. Now, you got to forgive the professor of history. Some of you may also not know, most people do not know this, that at the end of May of 1940, even Winston Churchill would never admit this in his memoirs, but the evidence now has, the documentary evidence is very clear, even Churchill considered the idea of perhaps negotiating with Adolf Hitler. Churchill always said, we'll never negotiate. We'll fight him on the beaches, fight him on the streets. The position of Great Britain was desperate. France had fallen. The Battle of Britain was about to begin. Lord Halifax and the cabinet wanted to gain negotiations. Churchill wasn't prepared to go there, but he was thinking about it. In the discussions in the cabinet, the crucial voice speaking against negotiations with Adolf Hitler was Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain was still in the cabinet. He was no longer prime minister. He was still in the cabinet. And in effect, what Chamberlain said, I know Hitler. He deceived me, he'll deceive us. There is no possibility of a peace agreement with him. Nobody remembers that. All we remember is that this man, Neville Chamberlain, went to Munich, brought back that paper. Remember, some of you, and if you're my age, we used to see the newsreels all the time. I have brought you peace in our time, and the report is going hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray. 3 cheers for the prime minister. But the point I'm trying to make to you, whatever Barack Obama does, if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon on his watch, that is what he will be remembered for. For as I told you yesterday morning, in that very somber speech, which my wife has continued to hurl at me, never give that speech again, certainly not from the Bima. That is, and she's got a point there. I will never do it on a Saturday morning again. But the point is here, as I said to you, the consequences of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon are very, very dangerous. And therefore, Barack Obama has got to stop it. And then, as Mr. Kersner has pointed out, quite correctly, there is another issue, and it is a forgotten issue. It is the issue of Syria. Not so much, or not only because of the morality of the issue.
that we are now talking probably well in excess of 13,000 civilian deaths in Syria. It is, as many people have forgotten, the real issue in Syria is that the Syrians have spent decades building up weapons of mass destruction. Not nuclear weapons, but gas and biochemical warfare weapons. Everyone knows that the Syrians are loaded with it. And the great fear is, people don't talk about it publicly, but the great fear is that in the civil war that is taking place, the bad people, Al-Qaeda or the Muslim Brotherhood, will get control of those weapons and use them against the state of Israel. Somehow Barack Obama, probably through negotiations with the Russians, has got to guarantee that those will be secured. The Russians know where they are. They gave them. There are probably Russian technicians and Russian scientists and Russian soldiers that are probably playing a role in manning, in defending those places. By negotiations or whatever it may be, Barack Obama has got to make sure that those weapons do not get into the hands of very, very bad people. So he's got to go to Ramallah, go to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. He's got to deal with the Syrians. These are the major issues that confront him. This is, of course, the most important in terms of life and death for the state of Israel. When it comes to the election, one, I think Barack Obama is going to win. It will be much closer than it was in 2008, and I believe he will still receive the bulk of the Jewish vote. I do not believe he will get 78% of the Jewish vote. The problem, of course, is, to use an old expression, the personal chemistry between Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu is not particularly good. Barack Obama treated Netanyahu really in a bad way, and that resonated poorly in the American Jewish community. I go around the United States, and I must tell you, particularly for very hardcore supporters of the State of Israel, particularly in the Orthodox community, particularly among people over the age of 60, there is a weakening of the support for Barack Obama. So I don't think he's going to get 78% of the Jewish vote. But if I had to bet, he'll get somewhere between 68 and 75% of the Jewish vote. That he will get. The reasons for this are fairly obvious. It goes back a long time. By now it goes back a long time. Some of you may not know this, but at the end of the 19th century, beginning really in the post-Civil War period, as Jewish immigrants began to come into the United States, Jews tended to vote Republican. And the reason for that was, what did those East European Jews know about the United States? Did they know any American politicians? Well, they probably heard of George Washington. But of those who were politically astute or politically conscious, they all knew about Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. And a man who freed the slaves was a man, by definition, who had to be good to the Jews. Actually, Lincoln was good to the Jews. Lincoln was the man that rescinded Order Number 11. Only once in the history of the United States did an American government official issue an anti-Semitic proclamation. That was General Ulysses S. Grant. That's the famous or infamous Order Number 11, expelling Jews from the Tennessee Valley. A group of Jews went to see Lincoln. They went from the south, from Paducah, Kentucky. They linked up with Jews in the north. They went to see Lincoln, and Lincoln immediately rescinded Order Number 11. So Lincoln truly was a friend of the Jews. Jews understood this. It is not really until the 1920s that Jews begin to enter the Democratic Party. The Jews always had a problem with the Democrats in the early part of the 20th century. The reason for that was, it used to be the solid Democratic South. That is, white Southerners opposed the Republican Party because the Republican Party was not only the party of Lincoln, but it was the party of Reconstruction, which Southerners considered to be an abomination. Moreover, white Southerners, and here was the problem for the Jews, the Ku Klux Klan, which numbered millions upon millions of supporters, not only in the South but in the North, in the first 25 years of the 20th century, was linked with the Democratic Party. At the 1920 Democratic Convention, there was a Klan delegation. The Klan hated blacks, the Klan hated Catholics, and the Klan hated Jews. There was a problem. The man who begins to bring Jews into the into the Democratic Party is the governor of New York State, Al Smith, a Catholic. The first Catholic to vote to really run for the presidency of the United States in 1928, and he will lose. But he will do something. He will open the Democratic clubs in New York City and throughout New York State to Jews. He will give the orders to Tammany Hall. He will give the orders to all of those Democratic organizations. You allow the Jews in. He would break the monopoly of Irish Catholics within the state of New York. And then, of course, this would really be completed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. What's the old joke from the 1930s and the early 1940s? The Jews, it used to be said, live in three worlds. They used the Yiddish at the time. All Jews live in Die Welt, this world. Some Jews think of Jene Welt, the world to come. They all love Roosevelt. That is 90% in the Jewish, the heartland of the Jews, the 5 boroughs of New York City. In some precincts, 85 to 98% of the Jewish vote would go to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. There are a number of reasons for this. We don't have to go into it here. This will lead to a steady situation where the Jews will identify with the Democratic Party, forcing one Republican, probably, certainly a conservative, to throw up his hands and to make a very interesting statement. As the votes came in on one election night, he throws up his hands and says, "These damn Jews, they look like Episcopalians and they vote like Puerto Ricans." In short, that is, the Jews are one of the few groups in American society that do not vote their pocketbook. The Jewish association with liberalism goes back, for those of you that know your European history, goes back to the middle of the 19th century. Again, for Jews, there are a number of issues here. Let's say less hostility to government intervention than is to be found on the part of most Americans, certainly a large number of Americans. Jews believe that government has a positive role to play. In addition to that, I don't want to give you a history lesson, if you look at early 19th century liberalism, it really smacks very much of 21st century conservatism. That is, early liberals did not believe in government intervention. They believed laissez-faire, all of these things that you should be familiar with. But one thing is consistent, and this American Jews are very concerned with. Whether you're a liberal in 1825 or a liberal in 2012, you believe in the separation between church and state. That is, the state does not have no church, no religion should be more privileged than any others. This is sacrosanct for American Jews. And the problem, of course, as some Jews look at the Republican Party, they see a breaching of the wall, and they see the Democratic Party holding firm. What I'm trying to tell you here is that most American Jews will, in fact, continue to support the Democratic Party. The other problem is, and here we are behind you, or let us say, well, we're behind you, or we're very different. As I told you once before, it's because I come here and I go to other places in Canada. I love the country. You are the politest people in the world, so polite, in fact, that you drive me crazy. But you are very, very polite. Sometimes I get upset, but it's always my being upset is always diffused. Because even if it's behind the store counter, it's out in Vancouver, everybody is so polite. But I say to my American friends about you, they look like us, they speak like us, they dress like us, but they're not us. There's a difference. And one of the differences is, and this is disturbing, the Pew public opinion polls, and that's one of the most respectable polling centers, indicates that only 4% of American Jews consider Israel central to their identity. That is, the centrality of Israel, concern for Israel, is not that important anymore for large numbers of American Jews. That's the price of assimilation and the price of acculturation. So if Barack Obama, let us say, does things vis-a-vis Israel that are controversial, most American Jews are not terribly concerned about it. Now, if he really took a hostile position, as the first President Bush did, that's something else. If he began to publicly attack Israel then I think you would get a greater response. But there is nothing that he has done so far that will antagonize large numbers of Jews. So once again, he will get the bulk of the Jewish vote. The Jewish vote is less important in the United States than it was before, largely because, again, the Jewish percentage of the population is not as great. We are now talking about a Jewish percentage that probably at a maximum is 1.8% of American society. There are now 305 million Americans. We are not talking again about a large percentage of Jews. Moreover, the greatest number of Jews are in states that are in the Democratic pocket. That is, they will go Democratic. If every Jew voted against it, they would still probably go Democratic. That is California and New York. This you can take to the bank. California and New York are going to vote Democratic. Where the Jewish vote is particularly important are in 2 states, and a little bit less important maybe in a third. The 2 most important states, these are the swing states. These are the states that a Republican has to win. One is Ohio, and the other is Florida. These are the 2 crucial states. And the Jewish vote, particularly in Florida, will become very, very important. There is a fairly large Jewish community in the metropolitan Cleveland area, a smaller one in Columbus, and again another small one, relatively small, in Cincinnati. It's not large in comparison to those other states, but the vote in Ohio is going to be very, very, very close. And therefore, if there's a Jewish disaffection or a movement away from the Democratic Party, it will be very, very consequential. In Florida, again, that's also, a Republican has to win Florida. A Republican, in this case, has to win Ohio as well. In Florida, we are talking probably about 700,000 Jews if you go from Palm Beach all the way down to the south. That's an important vote. But a lot of those people are transplanted Northerners. And the result is they bring with them the political baggage of what they had in the North, which is identifying with the Democratic Party. On the other hand, this is largely an elderly population, and again, some of these people have become disaffected because of his relationship with the State of Israel. Now, when I told you a few minutes before that only 4% of the American Jewish community considers Israel very terribly significant, I must tell you there are other issues. And on some of those issues, again, the Jews will identify with the Democratic Party. One of the important things that's going to play out, and no one knows this, no one knows how it's going to work out. I don't know how it's going to work out. What's going to happen if the American Supreme Court declares Obamacare unconstitutional? We don't know what the consequences of that are. Number one, as far as most Jews are concerned, whatever the American public may think, most American Jews believe that Obamacare is the right way to go. There are flaws in it, but again, one of the bad things, one of the disgraces of American society is that 46 million Americans were not covered by health insurance. The major cause of bankruptcy in the United States is the failure of people, the inability of people to pay their medical bills. So Obamacare, with all of its flaws, is accepted, I think, by most Jews. But one doesn't know if it's declared unconstitutional. Yes, it will be a public humiliation for the president. But the problem that Barack Obama has now is the problem of re-energizing his base. It's not 2008 anymore. In 2008, large numbers of people, large numbers of Americans voted for Barack Obama precisely because he was an African American. The greatest disgrace of American society is American racism. To vote for a black man really exonerated you, made you feel good, because you could shrug off all of the previous racism. I knew Barack Obama was going to be the President of the United States because a very close friend of mine and his family they are from Connecticut, they went to Pennsylvania to campaign for him. They knocked on the door, and a woman. This is a lower middle class neighborhood. And the woman answers the door. And my friend asks, we are supporters of Barack Obama, we want to know who you're going to vote for. And she replies, I do what my husband tells me. So can you please ask your husband? He's upstairs. She yells upstairs, honey, who are we voting for? There are people here that want to know. This is a direct quote now. A direct quote. Tell him we're voting for the nigger. End quote. When I heard that, I knew Barack Obama was going to win. It is as simple as that. Or, not long after that, there was a picture from Georgia, a photograph. And in the photograph, a group of young white men, young men in their 20s, and they held up a placard. Rednecks for Obama. When you see something like that, you know that things have changed. Now, the issue today is, well, we got over that. We elected an African American, and therefore, again, all of those feelings that you had at the time may, of course, they may be gone. He's got to re-energize the base. If the Supreme Court declares the health care plan unconstitutional, yes, it's a public humiliation for the president, but it will enable him to rally the troops. Because the issue in my country very often is, for many people, who will comprise the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court is an activist court. The Supreme Court, in fact, determines a lot of things in American society. And it is an issue. The president appoints the justices to the Supreme Court, and indeed, that is a major issue. That is, it can rally the base. To show you how things get complicated with the Supreme Court, someone that went to the same high school as Roberta and I did, who is probably the leading liberal and probably the outstanding intellectual liberal on the Supreme Court, is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is truly a survivor. 2 bouts of cancer, particularly one with pancreatic cancer, then colon cancer. Today, for the last 2 years, liberals have gone to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and have asked her to resign from the Supreme Court. Liberals have asked her. They are frightened that if she dies before 2012 and a Republican comes in as president, she will be replaced. If she dies in that period of time, then a Republican president will appoint a conservative justice. Better that she leave now while Obama is president, and he can replace her with another liberal justice. The Supreme Court is an important issue. So again, I'm telling you for the 3rd time, we do not know how that is going to play out. In addition to all of this, there is, of course, who represents the opposition. Now, Governor Romney is a good and decent man and a smart man. But he presents a problem for Jews and for most Americans. There are public opinion polls that show that my compatriots, some of my compatriots, are more opposed to having a Mormon become president than to having a Jew become president. The Mormons present a problem for some Americans. Now, I'm not being flippant here. Let me say to you, I'll give you a statement. Antiquity confers legitimacy. Did God get the Torah from Moses? Did God give the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai 3,000 years ago? You either believe this or you don't believe it. But you know what? It was 3,000 years ago. Maybe it happened. If I was speaking to a Christian audience, remember the fundamental building blocks of Christian faith are Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. Did he really rise from the dead? Well, it happened 2,000 years ago. In those times, after all, Elijah goes up there. No, people can, maybe in that holy land, people can rise from the dead. Antiquity confers legitimacy. But that 150 years ago, a man found near Buffalo, New York, some gold plates from the angel Mormon. It doesn't wash. For many Americans, it doesn't wash. In addition, I'm not being ridiculed. All religions are based on basic articles of faith. Do not misconstrue this. As a Jew, I say to you, we cannot prove certain things. Do not be offended. We all celebrate Passover. There is not a shred of historical or archaeological evidence to indicate that the Exodus ever took place. You and I believe it. There is no archaeological evidence whatsoever. None. Was Jesus born of a virgin? When's the last time that a virgin gave birth? Right? You can't prove it. Did he rise from the dead? You can't prove it. Did the angel Gabriel give the surahs, the chapters of the Quran, to Muhammad beginning in the year 612? Muslims believe it. Other people do not. So there's a problem here, again, with the Mormon religion. Actually, while Jews have a problem with the Mormons, evangelical Christians have a greater problem. For us, what are the holy books? The Tanakh. The Tanakh and the Talmud, that is the Jewish Bible, and the Talmud. These are our holy books, right? For Christians, depending upon whom you're talking, their holy books are what they call the New Testament and what they call the Old Testament. The Catholics integrate most of our scriptures into their scripture. The Mormons integrate something else. That is, if a Mormon missionary comes to your house, he or she will try to give you the Book of Mormon. Again, the Angel Mormon. It's another text. Evangelical Christians do not consider the Mormons to be Christians. That's a problem. For us, the problem is somewhat compounded. We do not like proselytizing. Proselytizing is essential to the Mormon faith. And some American Jews, get particularly upset that the Mormons are baptizing all of our dead. Now, I must tell you personally, it doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm not worried. It doesn't bother me. But there are some of our people get very terribly upset, especially when it comes to the Mormons baptizing those who were murdered in the period of the Holocaust. So Governor Romney has a problem within the American Jewish community. He will do better. He will do better than was done, let us say, by John McCain. And to give you an idea of how attached the American Jewish community is to the Democratic Party, no one in American politics who was active in American politics was more supportive of the state of Israel than John McCain. And yet John McCain probably got 22% of the American Jewish vote. So what does it all mean? It means, I think, if I had to bet, but in the United States, remember our election campaigns are they're very long. This is the beginning of June. This is an eternity in American electoral politics. Lots of things can happen between early June and that November election date. Barring some unexpected things, I would think, one, I told you now for the fourth time, most American Jews will vote for Barack Obama, and Barack Obama, I think, will win. I think will win. The one thing that he is defying is that never since President Franklin Delano Roosevelt has any American president won an election, a sitting president won re-election with an unemployment rate of over 7.4%. The unemployment rate in the United States now is 8.2%, and the trajectory is not good. The president, I can tell you what the guidelines are, he's already laid them out. The president's position is, I got all of this mess from President Bush, he's the one that's responsible for it, you've got to give me time. He's he's going down a dangerous road when he says, we've got to stay the course. The last man that said that was Herbert Hoover. That didn't augur well. But staying the course, it may work for the president. The Republicans are going to say, they're going to say two things. Well, the president is going to say, it would have been much worse if I didn't do what I did. He's going to say, I saved the automobile industry. I saved all the related industries. I put the teachers and the policemen back to work, again, by the stimulus packages. The Republicans are going to counter, so you did all of this, and we still have 8.2% unemployment. They will also point to the fact, and this is where the president has also made mistakes. He made very rosy predictions before he was elected and after he was elected. about the status of what the economy would be if the Congress implemented some of his things. He said that the unemployment rate would go by 2010, would be down to 6%. You can bet your last buck that what's going to happen here is the Republicans are going to trot out all of these positions that he's taken and going to say, you simply cannot believe him, this man is pie in the sky, and he's an optimist. But these are the problems. And the one thing to keep in mind, last point for me, in the United States, I cannot speak about Canada, in the United States, as a rule of thumb, the undecided voters go 2-to-1 against the incumbent. They go 2-to-1 against the incumbent. So, for example, if in the last poll before the election, 46% of Americans think they say they're going to vote for Barack Obama, and 45% for Mitt Romney, that leaves 9% undecided. So 2-to-1, 2/3, that is 6% will go to Romney, bringing him to 51, and 1/3 will go to Obama, that will give him 49% of the vote. The thing to watch in an American election are the numbers of voters, the percentage of voters that say they are undecided. Once again, 2-to-1 really go, as a rule, go against the incumbent. So when all is said and done, what can I tell you? Stay tuned. Thank you very much.
We'll have some brief questions and answers, but I have to take Chairman's prerogative. I've always wanted to ask you a question, but I've been busy with the video and such, so I'm going to ask you this question. With regard to the nuclear situation that may evolve with Iran, I sent an email to my political science professor and asked him this question. What would you suggest if Iran becomes nuclearized, if you will, has an offensive missile? There is Israel in its path. It's a clear and present danger. His suggestion was, rather than have Israel attack Iran, I would have the Americans put nuclear missiles in Israel, have Americans control those missiles, and say, now, you attack Israel, you're going to be facing America and American missiles. I'm curious what your response would be.
I understand that response, and it is given by a man who certainly is sympathetic to the state of Israel, and thank him for us. But I would say I don't think it's important. I think it's superfluous now. The Iranians know the Israelis have nuclear weapons. They know that. Everybody in the Middle East knows that. So to have an American deterrent it's unnecessary. It's just added on to the Israeli deterrent. The problem for the Israelis is going to be that mutual assured destruction worked between the United States and the Soviet Union because both had second and third strike capacity. If all the American bases, all the American B-52s were shot out of the sky, there was always the ICBMs and the silos. There was also, of course, the nuclear submarines that could launch nuclear weapons against the Soviet Union, and they had the same thing. Do the Israelis have second and third strike capacity? I suspect, for example, that most Israeli nuclear weapons are based in the Negev. That makes the only sense. You don't station nuclear weapons really near large population centers. But the Negev is small. Suppose there was a nuclear attack on the Negev. What does this mean for Israel? I mean, this is doomsday stuff again. So I don't think it's really, it's a good idea. It is not necessary. Now, what I should have said to you, to give Barack Obama credit, is what is the latest technology innovation within the state of Israel? And that's Iron Dome. That is, remember, that shoots down, that defense system that shoots down short-range rockets, really terrorizing the Israeli civilian population. Well, Iron Dome may have been developed by Israeli specialists, but the money for Iron Dome, a good deal of it, has come from the United States. And Barack Obama has not been miserly in turning money over to the state of Israel. That is, money for defense purposes. So that too must be given, he must be given credit for that. The question concerns, let me put it, that's the question. It's a good question. Let me say to you, Barack Obama is on record against not only preventing nuclear proliferation, but really reducing the nuclear stockpiles of all of the countries, including the United States. So how will he deal with Israeli, that is the possession of Israel by Israel, of a nuclear reserve? The answer is he eventually will come down hard on the Israelis. Now, here's an issue for us, and that is an American president is at his freest in the first 2 years of a second term. He's not running. In the United States, the Constitution prohibits him from a third term. And in the second 2 years of that second term, he's going to be pressured by people in the party who are going to be looking to replace him. But for the first 2 years, he's a free agent. And that's part of the problem for those people who are concerned with Israel. Remember, some of you may remember, it happened not long ago, the open mic episode, when he turned to President Medvedev of Russia and said, tell Vladimir, that means Putin, tell him I'll be freer after the 2012 campaign. Meaning that we can make concessions, we can talk about doing things in Eastern Europe. Well, does it mean also that he can do things in dealing with the Israelis? He doesn't have to worry about not only the American Jewish vote. This you should know. In the American Jewish community, it is not monolithic. We are talking about some people, one, who don't care about Israel, some people who care moderately, some people who care passionately, but among those who really are concerned passionately about the state of Israel, there are those who are very, very moderate, lean to the left, the J Street people, and there are those people who are center right, and those are the people around AIPAC. So there's no unanimity at all here. Where is the greatest support for American Jewry? In the evangelical community. Whatever one may think about the evangelicals, they are almost solidly supportive of the state of Israel. So the point here is Obama he's going to be a free agent here if he wins in 2012, and what will he do? So in dealing with the Palestinians, I think he will take the position that he outlined before, that is in the summer before the UN vote, where he hammered at the pre-67 lines. My own personal view is, and I think the Israelis have been wrong too, they shouldn't talk of pre-June, post-June, doesn't make any difference. They should hang on to Article 242. For those of you that have the long memory, that came out of the Six-Day War. And the American ambassador, Arthur Goldberg, together with the British ambassador, specifically stated, it reads in English, and that was the predominant translation, that Israel should withdraw from occupied territories. And Goldberg, till the day he died, and so too the British foreign minister, the British ambassador, they said we specifically left out the definite article. We did not put the occupied territories. We put occupied territories, indicating that there was flexibility, should be flexibility on the Israeli side. So, directly answering your question, will he come down on the Israelis? The answer is yes. That's why it is important. One of the things that AIPAC has done right is to understand that in the United States, if you always have problems with the Oval Office, that is with the White House, one of the ways that you can put pressure on the White House is to gain the support of Congress. And Congress is very, very supportive of the state of Israel. If the president comes down hard on the Israelis, the response of those who are concerned for Israel should be, yes, we will talk about relinquishing our nuclear reserve, but only when peace comes to the Middle East. When we have solid, verifiable peace agreements with the Arab world, with Iran, and those peace agreements will guarantee the security of the Jewish state. I think that position can act as a countervailing power or countervailing pressure to President Obama. The Pollard case is really a disgrace. But let me be clear here. Pollard was a spy. He got paid for what he did. He was a spy. And the argument of some of his defenders that he really shouldn't be considered a spy because he gave information to a friendly country. What you and I do not know, and I'm not saying it is true, but here's something we do not know. When you give information that has been gathered by intelligence agents, you give this information that is American intelligence agents gathered information. That information was given to the state of Israel. We know that the Soviet Union penetrated Israel, the Israeli government. There were spies, Soviet spies in Israel. We know that. That is a given. Here's the problem. If American agents gather information and then an American turns it over to the government of Israel, what we do not know were the names of the Americans or the agents working for the CIA. Were they somehow mentioned in that information? Did Americans or were people working for the United States die as a consequence of Pollard's turning over the information? You and I don't know that. But that is a real possibility. And that may be why there is so much adamancy on the part of people in the United States, Democrats and Republicans, particularly those who are close to the Pentagon and the CIA, who are reluctant to let Pollard go. And certainly in terms of the spying, there are people who did, from our perspective, from what we know, did much worse damage to American interests than Pollard, and they have been let out of prison. Also, it would appear that the government, the prosecution, violated earlier agreements that were made with the defense attorneys. That is true too. But in direct answer to your question, yes, it would be a good thing. The problem now, as we get closer to the election, the president does not want to be accused of pandering. That's the problem. Now, one other thing that I should tell you, I move very quickly. I'll say this to you. I have a bet with a friend of mine that Obama, I used to say, hints where I'm going, I used to say that President Obama doesn't have the cojones. He doesn't have the balls to launch a preemptive strike against Iran. I may be wrong. This president has a ruthless streak in him. And how do you know it? Look at what the drones are doing. Bush initiated the use of the drones. Obama has doubled or even tripled the use of drones. In Canada and in the United States, you should never let any anti-Israeli position, anybody who takes an anti-Israeli position, certainly in the United States, and says that the Israeli drones are killing civilians and therefore the Israelis are murderers, no American can say that. Because if the New York Times articles are correct, not only has he increased the number of drone attacks, not only have civilians been killed, the president personally approves. Some of you have maybe read the articles. There's a meeting once a week where on the board are the pictures of terrorists that are targets. The president selects who is to be attacked, who is to be singled out for targeted assassination. And we all know that civilians have been killed as a consequence of those attacks. And the killing of Osama bin Laden. This guy, there's a toughness there. There's a ruthlessness there. And so there may, in fact, be an attack. But I think the consequences, and I said this to you, whether you want the attack, whether it should be today, should be tomorrow, next week, the consequences of a preemptive strike on Iran, be it coming from the United States or Israel, are very, very great. So I think the president will wait till it's 1 minute to 12, 1 minute to midnight, before an attack can be launched. But my own feeling is he does have the nerve to make that attack. Yes, one last question. Nearly all of them have since 48. Obama's people counter, well, many of them didn't visit them in the first term. They visited in the second term. But again, I say to you, these are not normal times here. The Israelis are going to, and he's asking the Israelis, to make great concessions. There is nothing, with all of the technology that we have, there's nothing like flesh to flesh. How is Sadat able to get Camp David? Because he goes to the Knesset. And you know what? That damn fool Yasser Arafat, had he gone to the Knesset, and had old man Assad gone to the Knesset, had he said what, of course, had been said by the Egyptians, had he said, look, it's over. Give us what we want. It's fair. We'll give you security. We'll give you the peace agreement. We'll exchange embassies. The Israeli public would go along. I think it would go along. Even if Abbas went to Jerusalem, spoke to the Knesset, and said he would have to, of course, renounce the idea of the massive return of the Palestinian refugees. But if he demanded, we must have a presence within Jerusalem, most Israelis would go along. For Israel, the issue always has been, I said this to you before, for Israel, the ultimate issue is security. Yes, there are some Israelis who say it's God's land. God gave it to us. This is the dawn of our redemption. There are even secular Israeli nationalists, again, old man Netanyahu, not particularly religious, or his son, Benjamin Netanyahu, certainly not particularly religious. These men are secular Jewish nationalists. This is our land, they would say. This is the Israeli patrimony. This is the Jew. Goes back. This is the land of Elijah, the West Bank, and so on. This is our land. But I'm telling you, the overwhelming majority of Israelis, even most of those who vote for Likud because Likud seems to be the party that is the one that is most able and most willing to defend the security of the Jewish state. If you can allay Israeli concerns about, let us say, about security, anybody who does that can get almost everything he or she wants from the state of Israel. So, once again, thank you very much, and watch in November. Thank you all.
We call upon Cantor Simon Spiro, who's going to formally thank Professor Berk.
Thank you, Larry. So yesterday, Gary Mansfield, our past president, thanked Professor Stephen Berk and said, that was music to our ears. And I would like to say, there are so many times that Professor Stephen Berk has lectured and has been thanked in so many ways, it probably gets just a little bit mundane for you. So let me try it this way, in your parlance. Let me give you the words of the old country. And let me say, possibly with the music of the words of Rent, 525,600 minutes, 525,000 times we've thanked you. Probably. We thank you so much for coming here. You are American Jurors' mouthpiece. You are Canadian Jurors' mouthpiece. You are European Jurors' mouthpiece. And you should be world Jurors' mouthpiece. We wish you strength with your lovely wife, Roberta, for being your Asa Conegdo, for your Iron Lady, your Margaret Thatcher, who allows you to weave your magic here at Beth Tzedec. If you look around you for a second, you see just how full we are. We have only 2 or 3 things in the year that have this many people. One is that wonderful time of the year where we get together and we eat and drink, Kol Nidre. The other time is a miserable time of the year where we have to come and watch a musical, that's Purim. The other time is the annual general meeting where we hopefully get a minyan. And then for me, my personal highlight, and that of my wife, and obviously all of us here, is this wonderful, easy, understandable way on every single level to understand what's gone on, what's going on, and what will continue to be going on for us as Jews, as people who care about the world that we live in as Jews, And I just want to say, Professor Stephen Berk goes around the world lecturing. He will be going, obviously, with the Candace Assembly and with our Beth Tzedec group here to Germany at the end of June and on to Russia, to Moscow and St. Petersburg. I wish you Godspeed and l'chayil. Please, Tzeischem v'shalom, uvorachem v'shalom. Come back very soon. We always miss you and we love to have you back. Shalom.